Oh man, I gotta sneeze. How do I show others that I am a masculine man, especially if I don't naturally look the part? That is an amazing question. Testosterone levels have been plummeting. They've been dropping and they've been plummeting. They've been deplummeting for years. There's studies that are coming out left and right about this. You see it all over the internet. When I go online, I see a bunch of stuff. Obviously, it's curated to me, and these are the kinds of things that I see. And these are also the conversations that people are having now because it's become an important thing to us. It's become something that has a relevancy now, since us as young men are really sick of all the feminism and these things that just constantly barrage us and put us down. And if Satan can put you down, then he absolutely wins. Because if he puts you down as the head of this, as the spiritual head of your community, of your family, of yourself, then he wins, because that affects everyone below you who you are leading. But if you can show, and that's a bit of a tangent, and so that's why it might be difficult for you to look the part, because we have this plummeting levels of testosterone with the world that is around us. It's become absolutely crazy, it has. And there's not a way you can really escape it. We have EMFs everywhere we go. The foods that we eat are terrible, and we don't get the lifestyle that we need to be a normally masculine man inside of our normal masculine environment, what would make us normally masculine. So I did an episode recently about natural masculinity, so you can check that out. It's probably one of my last episodes. But even if you don't look the part, what can you do? All right, there are a couple of things that you can do, and this actually relates. I have a thing. It's a PDF that talks about my 3 core masculine traits. These are what I believe are the most important, and they're all biblically founded. But I'll give you a couple right off the bat. If people see these, some of these will be immediate and they'll be able to tell. And some of them, you'll have to get to know a person. They'll have to get to know you before you can really start expressing these. But once you do, they'll say, oh, and they'll get it. They've got it. So number 1, I would say leadership. Leadership is really important if you want to just show that you are a masculine person, because that's what we're meant to be, leaders. Adam was the leader of the garden. He was the one that was put there to protect it and to take care of it. And he was the leader of Eve, who was his wife. So of all of those things that were in the garden, Adam was the leader of all of them. And so leadership is that first thing we need to develop. And all of these, by the way, take time. This one especially is hard because you don't just develop this, but it is ironically the very first thing that people will see once they interact with you. So it's the hardest thing to develop, but it shows immediately. And I think it is so immediate because it's the hardest thing to develop. It's kind of an interesting nuance to think about. 2, I would say courage, having courage. And I'm going to give you practical examples for all 3 of these things, so stick around until the end. But having courage is another component of being masculine, because it takes courage to be a leader. The definition of courage is the ability to do something that frightens you. It's doing something even though you might be scared out of your mind. When we're doing things, we need to have the courage to lead the situation. 3rd is integrity. And this is the last one that I'll say for now, and you can find the PDF. I'll link it below wherever you're watching this right now so that you can find that for those of you who are watching this. But the last one I would say is integrity, because it's what glues together your campaign, you could say. Because you could have the leadership, and you could have the voice and the presence of a leader, and you could appear to have the courage behind your leadership, backing and motivating your leadership. But if you suddenly lack integrity, what do we see in all these church scandals? What are all these people being, all these things? There are a lot of problems. Going back years, like there's church scandals, and it's always based on someone's lack of integrity. What they're saying doesn't match with what they're doing, right? And then the secular people jump on the Christians because of that. When in reality, actually, we know for a fact that we are going to lack integrity sometimes. And by that, I mean we are going to sin sometimes. We need not to. And so really what they should be saying when they see this isn't how it's being presented, but what they should be saying is, look at this Christian. He just failed miserably, but he's getting back up. And what he's saying isn't actually, and this is better not be, because if what you're saying is contradictory to what you're doing, then you're not preaching the real gospel. But if you preach the gospel for what it is, then there should be no contradiction when you sin and you get back up. Jesus came for the sinners. Jesus came for you, and that is why you can have the confidence to say, you know what, I fell down, but it's not about the falling down anymore. It used to be all about the falling down. That was what kept us separate from God. But now it's about, how do I get back up? Because I know Christ has got me. And if I get back up correctly, what does that look like? Well, we just talked about this. The book of Psalms, where David is talking about repentance. I think it's Psalm 51 or 31. It ends in a 1, and it's one of those two. I was just listening to R.C. Sproul talk about this, and he was talking about the difference between the contrition inside of David's heart after he was truly repentant for what he had done, getting involved with Bathsheba, and then killing Bathsheba's husband so that he could have Bathsheba, and as a cover-up story once he got Bathsheba pregnant. Again, lack of integrity. This guy should not have been doing this, but that's where that integrity fell. And what saved him was the contrition he had in his heart versus the attrition that Esau had after he gave his birthright to Jacob. He was sorry, of course, after that when he realized what he had done, because I just made a massive mistake. How am I going to recover from that? He lost something. And David loses his child, that kid that he got Bathsheba pregnant with. He's going to lose that kid. But instead he says, I accept that punishment, and that hurts, but I understand. And he genuinely, it was a heart posture. It's always a matter of the heart posture. And that's what always is tried to be not focused on inside of anything, all of the other religions in the world. But really, it should be about keeping your heart alive and healthy and active. Philippians talks, like I just said this. I could quote these things to you all day because of how applicable and how real they are. And these are the things that we do best with when we do these things. These are what we do best with naturally. So no one is perfect when they're working on these things and trying to do these things. You have to really develop these things, the leadership, the courage. A couple of those examples. If you aren't a natural leader of, these are the examples I was going to tell you. If you're not a natural leader of people, maybe you're more introverted and you're not called to a place of leadership and loud speaking, then easily what you can do is just be a leader of yourself. Just be first a leader of yourself. How are you walking with God? How are you being a proper leader for your own life? And then that can extend to your family. If you have a family in the future, if you want a family in the future, you're going to need to be able to lead yourself firstly so that you can then lead that family as well. And then maybe that'll extend beyond there. But if that's all you're going to be leading is just your family, and you're going to be contributing in a way that isn't like directly leadership inside of the church or your community, that's fine. This shows if you have leadership inside of yourself and inside of your family, that communicates immediately that you have some sort of masculinity inside of you. And a lot of people, well, Jordan Peterson talks about this, confuse narcissism. Like the younger girls will confuse narcissism with confidence because they don't know the difference yet. But that's what they're seeing is this leadership. It's this brashness, sort of. And I'm not explaining it nearly as well as he does. But that's one of those things that they see and that becomes so attractive to them. So leadership, firstly, then courage, because it takes courage to be a leader, and it takes courage to do the things that you're scared to do. And that's why the people with courage are so much more highly respected, because they have the courage to do the things that other people aren't willing to do. And so there's a certain price you have to pay of the hardest stuff is the most respected stuff, naturally. And that is why people just gravitate towards it, naturally. People gravitated towards Jesus because he was so willing to do the hard stuff. He did the hardest thing for all of us. He bore every single sin for every single person ever. That is intense. No one else can do that. And that's why he is who he is. And he only was able to do that because of who he is. And that's an amazing thing. Like, we can't comprehend that as people, and that deters so many from the Christian faith. Instead of just saying, what if I just trust this? You know, I trust the chair I'm sitting on. You've probably heard that before. I trust the chair I'm sitting on, literally right now. But do I trust Christ just as much as I trust the chair? And then having the courage to trust Christ. And then he says, if you love me, you will follow my commands. And he calls us to live a life of integrity. So no matter where you are, you need to be leading at least yourself. You need to have courage to do the things that Christ calls you to do. And you need to have the integrity that he's calling you to as well. So those are 3 things. The other 3 are more like core principles, and they're really for like your mentality. And they're similar to this, but I would say that these things can come from those. So you can go find that down there.